Welcome to the Write Good Books podcast, the audio companion to WriteGoodBooks.com with your host Jason Bougger.
Hey, thanks for checking us out. I'm Jason, and we're here with our co-host Scott Michael Childers.
Howdy.
Howdy, how you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Great. Today, we're going to talk about writing conferences. What are writing conferences, why you should go to writing conferences, and probably most importantly, how to behave at writing conferences.
Yes, just call us Mr. and Mr. Manners today.
There you go, because manners are important when you go to a writing conference.
I guess.
You can chime in and correct me if I say something stupid. But
okay.
I think the most important thing about a writing conference is that a lot of times writing is kind of a solitary job. You hang out in your office, you write by yourself, you might get lonely, you might not have a lot of friends who write. You know, one thing, you go to a writing conference and you're going to meet a lot of people just like you.
At least in the writing part. They have a strong interest in writing. And sometimes you may be very different otherwise, but you still have that common thing. Mm-hmm. And then with that difference is you learn all sorts of interesting things.
Oh, sure, there's lots of networking.
Oh, yeah.
I think, a primary function of conferences is to attend sessions by other writers, which there'll be all sorts of sessions, instructional, workshops, that type of thing.
Yeah, at least for the beginning ones, beginning writers. As you get more experienced in writing, conferences are still very important. Maybe not for what's going on in the session room, but in the hallways outside. And we'll get into some of that later on. But yeah, even if you're an experienced writer, conferences are a good thing.
Yeah. I suppose we skimmed over. Maybe we should go back to say how to find conferences to attend.
Oh, yeah.
There's all sorts of conferences. If you're in a city the size of, we're sitting here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we've got the Nebraska Writers Guild, and they have 2 annual conferences. There's all sorts of regional ones. I suppose your best bet is just to search for them and look for regional ones. If I remember, maybe we'll put a link to a couple of sites.
Yeah. If you have a state Writers Guild or Writers Association, some states have both. Mm-hmm. Some states will have multiple ones. You may want to research if which one is right for you.
General or genre-based.
Yeah. Libraries sometimes would have information. They may not be sponsoring it themselves, but they may have something on their community billboards. Of course, the internet. So yeah, there's plenty of places if you just start looking.
Google writing conferences in your hometown.
Yeah.
And you'll find stuff more nearby.
So you've decided to go to a conference. Then what? Fear, scared? No, you're not afraid.
Don't be nervous. They're friendly.
So you decided to go. You registered. You've got the confirmation. You've got your travel plans if necessary. Taking the day off work. Taking the dogs to the kennel, the kids to the sitter, or vice versa. I don't judge. So what do you need to have in mind? First of all, if the conference has details about the program or special events, any of that stuff, go to the website that has all that information. Many of them have a website or a part of the larger group's website for details on that conference. Who's speaking, where's it at, how many breakout sessions, all of that good stuff. Take a look at that. Make some preliminary decisions. If there's more than one session being held at the same time, roughly give yourself an idea of which one to go to. Now, day of, you may change your mind, and that's fine. But kind of have a rough idea of how the day looks to be going.
Especially a large conference might have some similar topics, similar panels and sessions, so you might want to look at the schedule and kind of plan out what you want to do, which ones you want to attend. Some of them might have room limits, so you might get to one and find out it's full, have a backup plan.
Right.
Smaller ones might not have a choice. You might just sit in the sessions, but look over the schedule and prepare. Go to what you're interested in, but also go to what you're not interested in. I'm going to sound silly, but you might learn a lot sitting there listening to a romance writer talk about writing romance for an hour.
Yeah. Well,
throw it in.
If you can broaden your skill set, or even just your point of view, you may not take everything out of that someone who writes in that genre might be.
Get lots of variety. There'll be sessions on marketing and sessions on the craft of writing.
One thing to think about too, is don't discount the special events. Is there a luncheon? Is there is there a opening reception? Think about going to those. You don't have to.
Right.
You don't have to go to those, all of them. But maybe pick and choose.
Those are when you network.
Yeah.
That's when you gotta be brave enough to talk to strangers and sit by people and introduce yourself.
Yeah.
I've been at some conferences that I've met some great people at the luncheons or drinks afterwards. And networking and just making new writing friends is a huge reason to attend a conference. Another good thing about writing conferences is they'll often have pitch sessions with agents or publishers. And what's cool about that is when you're sending a query letter to an agent, they're going to give you 10, 15 seconds to glance over your query letter and throw it in the garbage. At a pitch session at a conference, you'll usually get 10 minutes to pitch your novel and get to know the agent, and that can often lead to a full request or more.
Yeah. Or at least a relationship or feedback on how not to pitch that same story again.
Practice.
So yeah, take every advantage that you can. However, take care of yourself as well. Especially if it's your first one, plan some time for yourself to recover. I've known many people who go to all sorts of conferences. They'll go 8 o'clock in the morning to midnight, and they don't take a single drink of water, and then the next day they feel like they got hit by a truck.
Yeah.
So keep drinking water throughout the day. Eat your meals. Keep up your strength. If you need to take a session off, just one, do it.
Yeah, there's no harm in that.
Yeah. And I know there's many writers who are introverts and can't stand that many people all at once. Take care of yourself. Get to the stuff that you're really interested in. If you've got a friend who's going to some of the others, ask for their notes. Yeah, we were really strong on the idea of, all these opportunities. All these opportunities don't mean anything if you're not in a position to hear what's being said or make a good first impression. So look for all those opportunities. Take those that you can, but also take care of yourself during these. I was at a session or a conference, and I brought my wife along. She made it through half of the first day, and then that night, while she woke up when I came stumbling into the hotel room, says, "Now I know why you're so darn tired when you come back from these things. This is exhausting."
Oh, yeah, it is. So we've kind of went over what to expect and why you should do it. I'd kind of like to talk about what not to do at a conference, because you don't want to make a bad impression. So there's a few things that you don't want to rub people the wrong way, and one of the big things is don't print off your manuscript and carry it around and start handing it to publishers or agents or anyone else, because their hands are full. They're on the road. They're away from home. The last thing they're going to do is say, "Oh, thank you for giving me one more thing to carry." What they're going to do is, if they're polite, they'll wait till you're out of eye shot before they throw it in the garbage. But they might just throw it in the garbage. But with that said, you should bring your manuscript. Just bring an electronic copy of it. And that's only so that if someone would ask you to see it, you've got a copy you can give.
Yeah. I'll tweak that a little bit. Maybe bring a couple, but have them in your bag, and don't. Instead of offering a handshake, if you thrust a manuscript in their hand, that's poor form.
That is poor form.
And you will be remembered in the bad way. Yeah. Well, actually, you won't be remembered at all, because you'll be one of the same people who does it all the time. But have a couple on hand, maybe 2 or 3. But yeah, like you were saying, Jason, don't lead with that. Lead with, "Hey, I'm a person, you're a person. What do we have in common?"
Maybe don't word it exactly like that.
What do you mean?
Hello, fellow human.
Depending on the conference.
That's true.
Anyway, but yeah, it's like, you're dealing with people.
Yeah, you're dealing with people. You're there to get to know people. You're there to make contacts, and you're there to learn. Stay friendly. Talk to everybody. And if you're an introvert, like all of us writers tend to be, you just have to toughen up and talk to people. Don't get too drunk, ever.
That's just a general life thing,
I suppose. But yeah, you don't want to make a spectacle out of yourself at all, because a lot of times they are serving booze at these things.
Yeah. And, there's social lubrication is a phrase I've heard. And yeah, in moderation. Some of us no longer can partake in that, which is fine. But, oh man, I heard a horror story. There was a party, someone was giving free booze, and next thing you know, there's some interesting videos that I'm surprised I haven't seen on YouTube yet. None of any of our listeners would know this was a library conference, so yeah.
Those wild librarians.
Yeah. Unless you want to sell your memoir as My Life as a Drunken Jerk at Parties.
Or writing conventions.
Yeah.
And then we didn't really talk about the actual sessions. When you're in the sessions, it might be less formal than being in a classroom, but it's similar to that. Don't interrupt the instructor. Don't chime in with your opinion for every single thing the instructor says. Don't act like a know-it-all and say, well, what do you don't know what you're talking about. That's just going to rub people the wrong way. I think it's okay to approach the instructor.
Well, it depends on how it's set up, right? There are going to be some sessions where it's very interactive, and whoever's leading it is going to encourage a lot of participation.
Right.
And then there are other sessions where it's based off a lecture style. And they expect the audience to mainly be there to listen to the panel or the presenter. So have your reactions be appropriate to what they want that session to be.
Right. Yeah, I've been to some where it was the writing guest of honor just giving a speech. And then I've been to others where it was bring your first 25 pages and we'll critique it as a group.
Right. So there's a wide variety.
Yeah, lots and lots of variety of these things. Often writing conferences will have a place for authors to set up a table. If you're a published author, I'm 50-50 on whether or not it's worth doing that. I don't think you're going to sell books to other writers personally. As a writer, I don't go to a conference to buy books. But on the other hand, if you put your books out at a table, you're going to talk to other people who come to check out your books. So I think that's a personal preference.
Not like as a presenter, but...
Right, not as a presenter.
As a vendor space or something.
Yeah, some of them have, all the attendees have the option to bring a book. I've been at
we've been at least a few at the same one that attendees had a vendor space.
Yeah.
It's a mixed bag.
I've put out books before and just never sold any and didn't really expect to. But you do hand out business cards.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to go back also to the sessions.
Okay.
There is one point of behavior that this is one of my pet peeves. If you listen to this podcast long enough, you're going to have a huge list of my pet peeves. I have lots of pets, apparently. But if you're in a session and they have an open Q&A time, that is not the time to give a 20-minute monologue about whatever that may or may not be tangentially related to what the presenters were talking about. Q&A time is for question and answer.
Right.
So if you go up to the mic or raise your hand or whatever method they use, have a question. I'm not debating this point. Have a question.
And don't have an introduction to that question that involves telling everyone that somebody liked the book you wrote. I've seen those before. And just ask the question. Nobody needs to know your background at all.
Right. Questions are flash fiction. They don't need a prologue. They don't need an author statement. Okay. If you have an extended question that you really would like to know, Q&A session is not the time to do that. If there's a lot of background, those are the cases where it might be appropriate to ask the presenter for a business card, so that way you can email them later and you can think about what it is you need to say, and then they can think about it and give you a good answer.
Right.
There was one thing I was at, it was a librarian conference, and there was a keynote speaker, and there were over 1,000 people, maybe more. We had a full auditorium, huge. And someone came up and started rattling out their monologue. And the presenter said, "Excuse me, sir, do you have a question? If not, I'm going to skip you and go to someone over here because they have a question and the line is backing up." The person said yes and continued their monologue. He said, "Okay, I'm sorry, sir. Apparently you do not have a question. I'm going to go over here. Thank you. You can talk to me later." Do not put a presenter in that position.
Right. Right.
I'm glad he did, and if I was in the same position, I'd do the same. So that's a warning to all you conference planners. I will cut off the Q&A for Childers Con 2020.
There you go.
But yeah, please. Everyone has paid their money to see that person up front, not you. You may be great. You may be a wonderful person, but I didn't pay money to see you. So there we go. Rant over.
No, a good rant, a useful rant, too. You can tell Scott has been a presenter.
Yes, we'll talk more in another part.
As have I, and yeah, we'll do a part 2 to this one about if you're on the other side of a conference and you are a presenter. And I think on that note, we'll stop at part 1 on conferences. So check us out on the web at www.writegoodbooks.com, and thanks for listening.